several different ways that you can put the package in here. The way we're going to show you.
Hello everybody, and welcome to our video. My name is Jeff Crane. I'm over here at Paul Boniface's bee yard with Bill Prevett, the Onslow County Beekeeper Association president for calendar year 23. And the intent of this video is to show any and all beekeepers a few different ways how to install a package of bees. So the target audience for this video is the calendar year 23 Onslow County Beekeeper Association Bee School students. However, anybody can watch and learn from us. Feel free to leave any comments down in the video, but without further ado, we are going to get going here in a second once Paul gets set up with a simulated package of bees. So that's the other thing. It's January 31st and we don't have any packages to show y'all, so this is going to be a simulated video.
Here at the Warden's Farm, we're getting ready to install a package, a 10 frame box, and there's a few items that you're going to need to do this. You're going to need a hive tool for one. You're going to need your bee suit, of course some gloves, and you want to have a smoker on standby just in case. You also want to have a few other items. You want to have a spray bottle of 1-to-1 sugar water. That's 1 part sugar to 1 part water. You also want to have some rubber bands, and you want to have 2 that'll go on the frame to hold the queen cage. And you also want to have a item for holding sugar water, because you're going to need to feed the bees once you get them into the 10 frame box that you're going to put them in, or an 8 frame, depending upon what you're going to do. And there's other types of feeders you can use too, the glass quart jars. You can also use internal feeders. This one here is a gallon feeder, and this one here is a 1.5 gallons. You can see one's a little bit thicker than the other. They're both the same size that you can leave inside. You just have less frames inside the beehive when you're doing the installation, which doesn't matter. You just want to make sure that you don't have any open space where the bees will end up building comb there. So I'll put my suit on and we'll get into doing the simulation here in just a minute. But at first, you can go ahead and you can prep your bees when you get them. Your bees will come in a package that'll look just like this. You'll see you'll have a feeder can and you'll have the queen cage. You can go ahead and take the cover off before you completely suit up in your bee suit. That way your hands are free to help get the staples out, because the staples will be a little tough. So what you do is you just go ahead and you'll pop the staples out, and you'll take the cover and you'll set it to the side. And when you set it to the side, that's because you're going to need it here in a minute when you remove this can, because you're going to have to cover up the hole to keep the bees inside the package. Now the bees will be all inside the package, and along the bottom you're going to have some dead bees. That's inevitable. Bees live about 35 days, and some of them will die en route from wherever you're getting your bees from. Most of them probably be coming from Florida and Georgia. So you'll have some bees in the bottom, but if you have an excessive amount, say 1 inch or more, you'll want to contact the seller and say, hey, I got some excessive dead bees in here. How can we fix this problem? And they'll probably work with you in either replacing the package, or you'll work something out with them. So once you remove this top cover, you might get a bee or 2 that could come out. Don't be alarmed. They're just starting to fly around. But that will let you know, hey, let me put my stuff on. That way I can be protected. And you'll see on YouTube a lot of people do this with no protection. I don't recommend that, because if things go south, you don't want to end up running away and leave the bees there. So one of the things you want to make sure when you're suiting up is make sure that your zipper is zipped all the way. You don't want to leave a hole where the bees can actually get inside and climb inside. You can see right there where it's all zipped up. And then you can push your Velcro down. So then you'll go ahead and you'll put your gloves on, get everything good, ready to get in here and get the bees into the package, from the package into the box rather. So before I put on the last glove, we'll take the package, because the bees are in it, we'll set it to the ground right next to the hive, because now you want to prep the hive. So this is a 10 frame hive. This is the outer cover. There's an inner cover, a 10 frame deep box, which will have 10 frames of either foundation, wax foundation, or plastic. The inner cover may or may not have a hole cut on the back of it, depending upon where you get it from. Some people like blocking them off, but they're there for ventilation. That'll be a preference that you'll have to figure out what you want to do. So you set that in there, and then you got your 10 frames. One thing you want to make sure is that when you put it back together, all the frames are pushed together, because this is the perfect gapping that you need for your bees. You'll see I got some new frames and some older frames. So you want to go ahead, you want to remove 3 of these, because you'll take 3 of them out, because that'll leave you just about a perfect area to put the bees in. But this one is a little wider than some of the others, so I'll take out a 4th, and you can see there's a little bit of old foundation on here. So I'll set that one to the side, and now that I'll make sure there's enough room, which there is. So now we'll go ahead and we'll prep the queen to go into the hive first. So now that we're ready to install the queen into the deep box, the first thing you got to do is pull this can out. Now what I would recommend to do is, before you take that out, is to take your sugar water and you want to spray down your bees. You don't want to soak them too much, just give them a light spray on both sides. And then once you got that there, then with the cover on there, you want to take the package and you want to just bump it. That will make all the bees that are crawling all over fall to the bottom, because that's where you want to keep them, so that you can get the queen and not have the bees all going crazy and flying around you. So you'll go ahead, after you bump the bees, you'll grab the can and you take the can out. When the can comes out, you can cover the hole right back up. That'll keep the bees inside, and you can take the can and just set it to the side, because it's full of sugar water. So you don't want to throw that out, because the next thing you got to do is you want to get that queen out of there. And you want to make sure that that queen is healthy and that she's alive. So you'll go ahead and you'll grab that staple, pull it out. If the staple stays in there, you can just bend it over, grab your queen, pull her out, and you'll have the queen here in your hand. Now, one of the things when this is happening, some of the bees are going to get out and they're going to fly around. Don't worry about it. They're not going to go after you. They want to go after the queen because they want to feed her. They've been getting used to her in the trip, and that way she'll be in here. The strap may or may not be on the end that has the cork or other items in there to keep the queen contained. And then you'll also have the candy on one end as well. In this one here, you can see the candy was on this end and the strap is on the opposite end of the candy. That'll be inside here. That candy will be white. And you'll have a queen, and you'll have probably 3 or 4 workers in there with her. So once you get this queen out, the first thing you want to do is remove the cork from the candy end. Never remove the cork from the opposite end of the candy, because you don't want to release the queen too early, because the bees are getting used to her and you don't want them to kill her. So you'll go ahead and you'll take your hive tool or knife or whatever you got, you remove the cork, and you can set that to the side. And now your candy will be here, and it'll be all the way up to the wood in your queen cage here. It'll be probably about 1 inch of candy. And the reasons that is there is because between the bees inside and outside, they're going to eat a tunnel to get to that queen so that they can release her. That'll take probably about 3 to 4 days. So that time period allows the bees to get used to her scent that she puts out by her pheromones, and that way they don't want to kill her. So now you'll lay the queen down on your hive, box here, and then you'll take your bees, set them to the side, keeping the cover over the bees. That way they don't come out flying like crazy. And now you want to prep a frame for your queen. You can either go ahead and staple this into where you're going to place the queen. I don't recommend to do that because there's another way you're going to want to do this, which we're going to show you in just a minute. And you want to have 2 rubber bands. Some people say 1. I like using 2 because if one breaks, you got a second one that's on the frame to hold her. So the queen will be in this queen cage, and you want to always make sure that this screen, when you put it in, will be face down when you put it into the frame. The reason for that is if that candy gets hot and melts, you don't want it to, if it comes down like this with your holes here, and if you put it downwards, that candy gets down and melts, it can block that hole because the bees inside will probably die as well, and so won't your queen. So by putting it this way, if it does melt, it can drip out through the holes down inside it, and it's not going to kill your queen. So you go ahead, you take your rubber bands, and you wrap them around your hive frame, or wrap them around your frame. So then what you need to do is you're going to take your queen cage, the cork has been removed, and you want to place the queen on the wax like there, and I push it in a little bit. That'll help hold it in place. But if you notice, the hole is not blocked though. One thing you want to make sure you don't do is block that hole for the bees to get in there and release the queen. Then once it's in there, you can take 1 rubber band, move it down into place. Then you can take your other rubber band. This is what's tough about wearing gloves doing this, is you'll need your hive tool to move it. And then now your queen is installed and ready to be released by the other bees. And now you can place her inside the hive. And you want to take one of your other frames and you'll move it in there and you'll press it together. Now you see the gap right there, so don't worry about doing too much to her. So you get it in there, and now you can get your package ready to go inside here. There's several different ways that you can put the package in here. The way we're going to show you is we're going to place the entire package inside the deep box here. And that's where, again, you'll take your water, you'll spray your bees. Once your bees are wet but not soaked, you'll go ahead and you'll bump them down again. And that way they're down, you'll remove your cover, and now you can place the entire package down inside your box here. The bees will be coming out, they'll be flying, and they'll be crawling all over, and they'll be working their way towards that queen because they want to feed her. So once that's done, you'll want to take your inner cover and you'll want to cover her up. Keep all the bees inside here. And one of the other items that you'll want to make sure your hive has is a hive reducer. Now the hive reducer has a very small hole and it has another medium-sized hole. Because these bees are so new and they're not defended yet, you want to make sure that you have the small hole, and you put that small hole down inside, and that will help the bees to defend themselves from any robbers that may want to come in here. Now the bees will come and go and work their way and get orientated by coming out the front of the hive, but they're still going to need to be fed. So some people like to take the can and just set it right on top. I don't recommend to do that, because if something leaks too much, the bees down inside could get covered in this and they could drown, and if it gets cold, they're going to freeze. So I recommend not to do that. I like using the frame ends. And what I'll do is I'll put one on each side of the hole and then offset the can onto it like that. It gives enough gap that the bees can crawl in there, they can get to the sugar water, and they can feed themselves. But I also recommend to use something bigger. You can either go to the quart jar, and you can have 2 of these, and you can put them on the same way. You can adjust it and set it so that you got one on each side, because you're going to be putting another empty 10 frame box right on top of it. And that should last them for the 3 to 4 days that you want to leave them in here before you check to make sure that the queen's been released. But what I like to do is I have a much bigger feeder, and I'll go ahead and this will be filled up with 1-to-1 sugar water. And when it's filled up, when you go to invert it away from the hive, because some will drip out. And when it drips out, you don't want to have it over the hole where it's just shooting down in the hole. Then you can take it, you can place it where it's offsetted. Then you can take your 10 frame box deep and you can place it on top of that. Now you can take your outer cover and you can put the outer cover back on and your package is installed. I like putting bricks on top of the cover just in case any wind comes. That way it will help keep the cover on. One of the other things when you're doing your install is they have a shake method. I don't like the shake method just because it upsets the bees. The bees will start flying around. You could damage some of the bees, and to me it's not a nice way to treat your bees. And what I mean by that is when you're installing the package, instead of placing it inside like that, you'll remove your cover after you've bumped the bees down and you invert it. And you can invert it and then you shake back and forth, and that dumps your bees down inside the box. If that's something you want to do, that's up to you. I recommend not to do it. Or something you may want to do is add that other frame back in there, and you can set the bees like this and they'll come and go inside it. Put the box on, set a feeder off on the side, and then you can put your box and your cover back on. That's another way that you can do it. But I recommend, like the first way we showed you, inverted and stuck down inside there. After 4 days, on the 4th day, you come back into the hive. You remove the box, the package. If there's still bees in it, then you can invert it and dump them. If any dead bees fall in there, don't worry about it, because the bees will remove them. Take your empty package, set it to the side, and now you'll go ahead and you'll check your queen cage. When you pull the frame out, it'll have bees on it. Don't be alarmed. So you'll just go ahead and you'll take it, invert it, and you can look and see inside if the queen has been released. If she's not in there, then she's been released, and you'll be able to check the hole and make sure that the hole was drilled all the way through by the bees eating through the candy. Once she's released, you can remove this queen cage. So you can take the queen cage, set it to the side, take the rubber bands off, which you'll be knocking bees down while you do, but don't worry about it. Set them to the side and you'll put the frame back in. I recommend to push all the bees to the center and leave the newer frames on the outside. Why is that? Because you want the cluster to stay warm in the center. The cluster is the big mass of bees, and that way they're in the center. You'll have your newer frames on the outside, and that way as they get used to the area and start moving around, they're going to want to start building new wax. It gives the bees something to do. You've got the foundation in here already if you're lucky enough to find some, and the bees will already be bringing in nectar and probably pollen. And then you get all your frames in here, and you'll take your frame tool and make sure all the frames are pushed together. And once this is done, you can put your inner cover back on and put your feeder back on. What I would recommend, if you have it, is to take your feeder, your 1 gallon feeder, and put it in here, put it to the side, and then adjust your frames over to it. And you'll have to adjust your gapping a little. Or if you use the bigger feeder, the 1.5 gallon feeder, which will give them more food, it fits in there nice and snug. And that way it gives you all the right gapping right off the bat. Because the next time you come in here, the bees will start having stuff propolised. So if you got your feeder in here, fine. If you don't and you're using the bucket, that's fine too. That's where now you'll take your inner cover, you'll put it back on, and then you'll take your outer cover, put that back on. And one thing you want to always make sure is that it's back on and it's level. Sometimes you'll put it on and it'll be cockeyed and you won't notice it, and you'll walk away and you'll be like, oh man, I got to go back there. Just make sure that it's on all the way, it's on correct. You can take your bricks or whatever you're putting on there to keep it weighted down, and guess what? Now you got a package of bees that's been installed and ready for you to inspect them the next week or two. So I hope this is a video that helps y'all. So Paul from Warden's Farm, have a great day.
All right, big shout out to Paul from Warden's Farm. Thank you for taking the time to walk us through and talk us through the steps that you take to install a package of honeybees. Be sure to check out his channel. I'll link him down in the description.